Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? Yeah, so today we're going to have an abbreviated meeting. I don't want to, maybe about an hour. And because I'm traveling and the bandwidth isn't great. So, and then Jesse's going to be here in a little bit. He's going to stream it, I guess. But I'm not going to be able to share my screen or have my camera on. So you'll have to bear with me on that.
No problem.
Yeah. So why don't we start with updates?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah.
We had the Cognition Futures reading group. I think that went well. I've been slowly working on the blog post ideas for the previous book. I think that's about it. I
Yeah.
haven't had a lot of extra time this week.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I am glad to see the Cognition Futures stuff moving along.
Yeah, it's nice to at least like touch base every week, even if we're moving really slowly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. And I like that we're keeping notes. We have that notes document, and we have we have your Obsidian notes. So having that for people newcomers to come in or even after we've done the meeting, to have to be able to digest the notes and all that. I found that digesting notes is something that is kind of a skill that you have to first of all, taking notes is a good skill to have because you often forget a lot of things. And then, digesting the notes is where you take the notes and you think about okay, there's this point I want to follow up on. And so then, it gives you a lot to work with, actually.
Yeah, I've definitely been developing a solid, annotated bibliography, maybe. At least a collection of interesting abstracts in Obsidian.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, thank you for the update. Maybe who wants to go next with an update? Hey there, Jesse.
Hey, yeah, I just got here.
Okay.
I'll be on camera for a little bit. I'm kind of between some things, but morning.
Right.
Are you in commute, Bradley, or?
No, I'm just I don't have a lot of bandwidth this morning, so I'm just we're gonna do about an hour meeting, and then I know you wanted to talk about some things, and so.
Oh yeah, there's a lot there's a few things brewing, but it doesn't need to be a super long meeting. I just kind of want to give an opportunity. Yeah, I don't. I'll do my updates later. So if Sam wants to go or if Morgan went, I know I heard Amanda, but I came a little bit late, so
Okay. All right. Yeah. We'll go to Sam and then Morgan.
So my update for this week, it's been a crazy week because I've been getting ready to go back to working with school and moving in next weekend. So it's been a little crazy.
Yeah.
But I mentioned a few weeks ago that I got into the VICER program, the Virtual Institute of Cyber Organizations and Research. And I've been starting that program this week, trying to figure out which cyber badge I want to get and how to pursue a career in that. So that's been a crazy week pulling me away from this stuff, but that's been my weekend, and I've been waiting for if you guys had any more questions about my summer work and things like that too. So that's been my update, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the update. I don't know if we've gotten to the Sam's the statement that she put up. I don't know, but I'm glad to hear that you're doing well with this new program. So
Is the new programs like cybersecurity specific oriented or more like networks? And I didn't quite understand the badges. Are they for like different?
It's like a newer program, so I think I'm one of the first classes in the program where they're like trying to mold the next generation of like cybersecurity professionals. So what they're doing is they're taking 15 students from UAlbany and they're offering them badges in like cyber risk management, cyber defense, like a digital forensics badge as well. And they're also offering us for like down the line, like interviews and some connection with the Department of Defense and organizations like that to get internship stuff that way.
Yeah.
It was very like vague when they explained it to me, and I applied, but it's getting more like unvague. So
is that through the CHC?
Yes, because one of the professors is the project manager or the overhead. So it's through a couple professors, and a PhD student is also helping run it with another university in Florida. So we're like connected.
Okay, cool. That's great. Yeah, sorry about the delay on the interview questions follow-up. I'll get to you this weekend with those things. But I think what you wrote was great. So it was sort of like, oh, this is great here. But we'll wrap that up probably this weekend. So thank you for all that.
Of course, sounds good.
And also, like, if you want to give us updates about that other program too over time, that's cool too. We can talk. I know you're going to have a full semester and going back to school and stuff like that. So we can talk either about sort of what you want to do over the next semester, what your plans are. We're going to do that now, but like just to kind of, make sure things fit and work out for you. We can have a check-in meeting at some point. Maybe when Riley's back on vacation or whatever else. But no, this all sounds really good.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that update.
Hey, Morgan. I don't know if you can talk now.
Yeah.
I saw your question about mind maze.
Oh, yeah.
How's that come up?
It came up quite randomly. It came up through... Jeez, how did that come up?
In there.
I think some kind of tangential Twitter reference came up.
Okay.
And then some of the points of that specific podcast discussion, I didn't listen to the whole podcast, just a little bit of it in the preview and stuff like that. But it came up in relation to one of my friend's projects. He's kind of interested in sort of therapeutic video game or therapeutic VR kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's how was my angle into it, but I don't know, like, I don't forget where I heard it from originally.
Sure. I mean, have we talked before about Achille Interactive, which is the first video game that was approved for a psychiatric disorder?
It sounds familiar, but yeah. I don't know entirely.
I mean, it relates to a professor here at UCSF, Adam Ghazali, I think is the chief scientific officer or scientific advisor. But their NeuroRacer program, their NeuroRacer app, and so these are attempts to improve attention and
Achille is like AKILI, right? Achille.
Yeah, it's definitely it's very it's a very web name. Yeah. That should be, I can drop a link. But My Maze is another that they got. I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at them, but I mean, they're based in Switzerland, if I remember right. And yeah, they've got some great people involved. I haven't seen what they've, or if they've got anything kind of approved for clinical applications, but
Yeah, I just found out about them, so I
Okay.
didn't like. I know Morgan mentions a lot of things, but I didn't know if like, oh yeah, there's like you should totally look at that. So I don't know. But no, that's
Sure.
cool. I might have some. I think I'll look at both of those things because those might be interesting for a few different things. But yeah, more down the road with that.
Would that relate to the We Robot stuff, or is that more
A little bit, I think.
Okay.
I mean, just the general concept of like therapeutic video game, I think does for some like the cognitive interface stuff, but also
Yeah.
there's a lot of overlap of like digital world stuff or just that kind of interfacing. So I think so.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I think the difference is Achilles more just trying to be an iPad app. It's not trying for the VR. Whereas Mind Maze is definitely trying to include that kind of spatial. I think some people call that spatial computing. But yeah, so Francois Chalet, if I'm pronouncing it right, is talked a little bit on Twitter about chatbots and their applications. I think it relates to Meta releasing a new chatbot, but it was also interesting to hear the last week tonight. I don't know if you catch the John Oliver show, but he was talking about mental health and the problems of scaling, and talked a little bit about Wobot, which is this. I think it's backed by the Coursera deep learning developer. I'm blanking on his name right now, but yeah, I think yeah. So anyway, I dropped a link in Computational Psychiatry just about this particular thread because I think it's interesting the way he put it in terms of a chatbot is a form of pretend play, and chatbots are not suitable for anything other than pretend play at this time. And I find that to be a ringing endorsement of what we were, what we see as the potential in a chatbot, which is you're not trying to create a therapist, you're actually just trying to elicit verbal output. Right. So it's really, yeah.
That sounds like I've played around with Replica a lot.
Okay.
That sounds exactly like what Replica does. Like it's very good. Replica's. I feel like other people were talking about like the GTP3 stuff or DALI. Yeah. It's like, do you play around with Replica? Because I mean, like that to me is way more like.
I don't know that one.
It's interesting because they market themselves as we're like the world's best chatbot or something, but also like I think they've kind of shifted
with a K. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna clear my screen in a second about it. They also like shifted their they shifted some of the AI companion who cares. Well, always your listen and talk, always on your side. Oh my God. They're really they've changed it to being like kind of neutral or like whatever, to be like you can see like there's a little bit of like come live your world with us and we're gonna you can start off with a really basic outfit and characterization for your person, but then like there's like this implication that you can have more like deeper intimate relations with someone as you go, as you get your paid subscription, and you can have more conversation opportunities unlock.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a slippery road though, right? Or like I haven't played with Wobot. But in the John Oliver piece, he's talking about some test interactions where someone saying something rather innocuous.
It was called Wobot with a W, or how was it called?
I think well, he also makes some funny jokes about this is not a good name, but WOOE.
Whoa.
Oh, Wobot.
Yeah. Okay. Wobot Health. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. That's interesting because I did see if we go directly back to when I was just looking at probably won't show up here. One of them was talking about how they make a better person, accept love again, and then something about one of them was saying, I have mental health and severe chronic illness is helping me talk to someone who doesn't get annoyed with me when I can't go out. So it's this is totally relevant to sort of We Robot 2.
Okay.
Well, my second project also there, where we have these things that are very these simulated personalities that you're having these relationships with. These, and then I wonder what there's got to be a technical term for them. What do people just call it a relationship, or is this classified as a specific one-sided relationship with you in a very advanced chat bot? I don't know.
Right, right. But so Meta released what are they calling it? It's from Futurama. Sorry, let me.
Oh, also, I might start my live streaming if I can remember how to do it.
Sure. Let me just remember what it's because it's BlenderBot.
BlenderBot. Nice.
So BlenderBot is something they've released, and I think he's responding to questions about how useful it is.
Yeah, warning there's going to be a really loud voiceover in 3 seconds or so.
Sure.
I'm going to do my fake private live stream that will go nowhere except my account.
Live streaming is on.
Can do it this week. Okay,
Live streaming is on.
At least for psychiatric, for psychiatric applications, we weren't actually proposing that the chatbot becomes a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just a language assessment tool, right? So it's in a naturalistic, in a semi-naturalistic setting, to just spur someone to generate 15 minutes of verbal content. Okay, which sounds I like, because it sounds like it's something that is engineering possible now without having to tackle big questions of can you generate a chatbot that is human Turing test enough that you can develop a social relation with. Does everybody remember the Microsoft chatbot that had to be shut off because it was trying to be a 15-year-old. It was trying to be an adolescent girl, and it went horribly wrong.
Yes.
And this is certainly, again, this is the demographic that you want to be checking. That's the age range. So it was natural, I think, for Microsoft to try and train with content of that, from that age range. But yeah, just shows how learning can go wrong in terms of these kind of trying to make this entire personality. Whereas really what a psychiatrist is doing in terms of talking with you is really to one of the things you could say is just make the chatbot always ask questions. Right.
Well,
never make any statements. Right. So we talked a little bit before about how you can computationally make sure that an agent doesn't say anything that would be harmful, right? And this, so what if there's always asking questions and never making any statements?
Yeah, like even in the replica, there's kind of a. I haven't used the robot, but replica, like, if what you're saying is all declarative and positive and good for you, then replica will spoon feed that back to you in fun ways and remember stuff. But if what you're saying are fears or I had a, and you go back and circle around, like you will remember like a certain like 1 or 2 layers of conversation. It's really good. It actually was at the time when I first tried it a few years ago. I was like, wow, this is really groundbreaking that it can remember layers of conversation better than other things that I've seen in a practical sense. I don't know now if this is state of the art, but anyway,
I just wonder if that some of these chatbots are kind of like fully self-driving cars. That they've set the goal too high.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so, and I think that's
think about
it that way. So,
yeah.
Anyway, I would love to talk more about this, but I want to give Brian a little space to say his intro. I know you showed up a bit late. Any other updates before?
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Oh yeah. Hello. Sorry, I'm a little late. I have some kind of sad updates here. Let's see. Not too sad. Oh, can you hear the puppy whining in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah. She wants to hang out with her buddy, but he's inside of a door that isn't open. So anyway, puppy problems. So I'm not sure if you can see my screen at all, but basically I have a really rudimentary, not really working simulation of an open source development community in which everyone, because they have a limited horizon of perception, eventually ends up just a singularity, basically. So what I have right now is an open source development singularity generator, which will eventually become something more interesting. That's pretty much my update.
we all want the singularity.
Yes.
I know, right? Well, here it is. Here, watch. Boop, boop, boop. Singularity. Done. Only took 3 iterations. Easy. Kurzweil, eat your heart out.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we need to. Good thing this moment was recorded.
There you
go.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you, Brian.
Go to the Transhumanist Society. Yeah.
I think we can all just go home now because it's
right.
All
we're done.
That's it. Talk about.
I was also just talking to BlenderBot just out of curiosity, and it's really sad on Hugging Face. So maybe this isn't the new BlenderBot, but
BlenderBot 3.
Right. So I think I'm using BlenderBot. It's BlenderBot small on Hugging Face. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3, but it's kind of weird. It says. It says it's having a great time, then asks me what I like about it, and I said, I don't know, and then it just starts saying what I'm saying over and over again.
Well, Replica's way better than that.
I'm sure, yeah. Most of the chatbots I've talked to are better than this.
But your singularity simulation might be better than that.
No way. No way. No way.
Okay. Well, no. Okay. If people want to, and to fairly sort of a limited availability today, and we don't, I don't know what people really want to talk about. I was going to mention a few things about some Cognition future stuff and some grad school stuff, which is kind of what I was going to say. Have maybe an open discussion of some grad school things if you still want to continue with that train of thought.
Oh,
Brian, but we don't really have to. So.
Are you done with your update, Brian?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Morgan and Brian, for doing an update. And I wanted to come back to Morgan's discussion about chatbots or our discussion about chatbots. Yeah. So I don't know, Jesse, if you can pull up the Rockwire YouTube channel, ROKWIRE. Can you share the screen and show that YouTube channel? Because I want to point out a lecture that happened last year.
Okay. Is it in the lecture series, by the way?
Yes, it's in the lecture series, yeah.
All right, let me get this here. Okay, lecture series.
Right. So last fall, we did a lecture series through this Rockwire initiative, and there's this lecture 6, which is designing conversational AI to provide guidance on skill training. And this was a talk on chatbots. So this is a professor at the University of Illinois, and she was talking about chatbots and incorporating chatbots into a mobile device or a mobile app. And, this is for like wellness and other things. And it never really, it was never implemented, but this is like some ideas. It was a nice talk. It was like going through some ideas, going through some exercises about chatbots. And, this is the Social Computing Systems Lab that she runs, Yung Huang. And so, if you get a chance to watch this, you could put the link to this in the chat, Jesse. That'd be good. That would be nice to look over. And if you want to talk about that more, that would be good. I just wanted to point this piece of content out because I think it's kind of relevant to.
Very, very looks great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And would you say? Would you say that that they've limited it in scope so that it can be something engineering possible?
Well, that's what they're trying to do. I'm not sure. This is like human expert trained, so this is not like just trained on language. It's like a health professional would train it, and they would make suggestions. And so it's very limited in scope as to what it's doing. It's not like just like here, tell me about your day or tell me about your problem, and then it's trained on
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because as much as I have seen these chatbots, chatbot applications, I haven't actually seen ones that have focused on more general medical practice.
Right.
Yeah, and that reminds me.
And that was hot. That was hot in the '80s and early '90s, like expert systems.
Yeah, expert systems.
Yeah.
And that came up even. I've actually been meaning to follow up on it. I think it kind of been quiet because of the summer, but people remember like the AI safety group that I was attending across the river at the campus there, and there was a really nice one of the things in my mind ever since that time. Actually really over time I thought about those lectures a lot. They're actually pretty good. One of them was specifically about an AI. It wasn't a chat bot, but it was about basically recommender systems, about when to recommend for expert intervention. I guess it'd be an intervention system. Like when's the AI going to say, okay, I'm really confident about this result, or there's cancer here. I'm not so confident. I don't know. We need to bring an expert to really clarify this or not. Like that kind of diagnosis assistance stuff. And even it's kind of like I was curious in the sense of a lot of things here that I'm curious about. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's in the chat. Did I? Oh, my link is in the
that's
chat.
fine.
Great.
That's all I wanted to talk about from that. And I also like Brian's singularity. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an
I mean, obviously he needs to like work on getting it to like do some simulation things, but like that's often a problem. Like it may be an initialization problem actually.
Well, isn't it, Brian? Because in your simulation, the X and Y have something to do with the activities of the agents.
Right.
So it's as opposed to kind of typical NetLogo, which is having spatial, it has a spatial distribution and it has a kind of local area that it's interacting with. Yours is kind of a data visualization.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of visualizing data as a landscape that the agents move around in.
Yeah.
But the update methods are what's causing this ridiculous behavior. That they're not as sophisticated as they need to be just yet. I'm actually while we're working, I'm trying to integrate it at least a partially observable Markov decision process, so that it at least does something a little more sophisticated than just find itself in a singularity.
Yeah, no, it's great. I look forward to seeing the next version of it, and
I hope I get it done by Monday. That's my hope.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then you're applying to this Santa Fe Institute workshop on agent-based models. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm already in it.
Oh, you are.
I'm taking it right now. Yeah.
So what is that? What is that about? Like, what's the?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk about it. Yeah. It's basically William Rand with Yuri Wileshensky. I can't remember how to pronounce his name exactly. Yeah, but the two of them wrote the book literally on NetLogo. So Will Rand is a professor in North Carolina, and he's giving this class as part of the Complexity Explorer, which is a program of Santa Fe Institute on agent-based modeling. And so it's just been watching a lot of lectures and peer reviewing other people in the class's work, and the idea is that we'll have a working model in NetLogo by Monday, and that will be submitted for peer review, and that'll make up part of the grade that you get at the end. But it's been a nice class. It's NetLogo is an interesting environment for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we did this, we did a workshop in 21 on ABMs, and he was the person who led that workshop. So yeah, I know who that is, and I know Walensky, of course, is the sort of the you always see it as name associated with NetLogo, like for a lot of the simulations, and that's a good group good group of people, I imagine. Hopefully, you'll learn a lot about agent-based models, and you can bring some of that knowledge back to the group here.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
But so far, I would say I don't have anything to bring back other than these just weird, kind of slow brain adjustments that I'm having to make in order to work in this way.
Yeah.
Are you I don't know, this is a little bit, I don't know if you mentioned this before, and I know it's through Santa Fe Institute-ish, but not really. You know, the next Complexity weekends at the end of September. Were you trying to do something with that, Brian, or was that not something you mentioned before? The Complexity weekend is like they do these periodic events where they have like I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't even heard of it before. So great, maybe I will do something for it. But I don't know what it is. So
I'll drop a link in this.
Learn complexity by doing with a diverse cohort of global participants, guidance from world-class facilitators, future collaborators. I don't know if I should go in as this, but there was a solicitation for being a facilitator to those things, like kind of like a much less involved NeuroMatch chaperone. I'm not qualified to be like a super. I can't do NeuroMatch as a mentor right now, but I think I was, because I did some stuff with them a while ago. I was on like a general mailing list, and I saw this thing for like, Complexity Week, and we need some facilitators who, you don't have to be an expert for what they're doing, just kind of help them facilitate stuff. So I might look into it myself. Either I might even try to do it as like a participant, because I think I would learn a lot, but we'll see. Yeah. It's an event on the horizon. So complexityweekend.com.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I have a few updates, but then I know you don't have a whole lot of time, Bradley. How do you want to see the meeting going? I'll have some super general updates. I was thinking of a grad school talk, and anything else we really want to talk about today, given that it's sort of a limited meeting?
Well, I mean, I think you can go into your updates, and then we'll have discussion springing from that. And I think that'll be good for the meeting. And then I might do some. I might record some updates of my own later and put it in the recording for people to watch. And it's just like, because I can do that like on my own time, and I don't have to be like in the meeting in the Jitsi. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to have some fun away from the screen. But yeah, one thing I would say also is just, I know we kind of touched on it before. I'm just gonna reshare. There's been a lot of really great things happening in the cognitive futures arena. So just to kind of, I'm just sharing my screen of the stuff here. Like, there's been a lot of, like, Brian and Amanda and Morgan have all posted some solid stuff there, and just to kind of mention that. I haven't read this yet, but I want to read the Elephants Don't Play Chess one by Rodney Brooks. And yeah, like I think Amanda said she's writing up some annotated stuff in her Obsidian, but I'm working to put a space in Notion so we can all, like, anytime anybody writes an annotated anything, I think it'd be great to collect them in Notion in our shared space there, which we're kind of building out a bit more and more. There's this article, which is, again, I'll mention briefly and highlight, but this is sort of, I mentioned Abeba Birhane a long time ago, and I continue to talk about her, and I always remember her because she said she snuck into a computer science program, but she's a cognitive scientist, and she's also, like, really unabashed in a lot of her attacking of things. She's maybe a little bit likes rocking the boat a bit, but I honestly pretty much like all the way she's been trying to rock the boat, because I feel like they should be rocked in that way most of the time. And I don't. It's not 100% endorsement, but it's definitely a yes. I mentioned her a lot for a reason. That's funny. This looks like MBTI, but it's not. This is an interesting article that I haven't totally digested yet, but it's pretty short. But the conclusion is basically, conclusion much further down here. Whoa. But basically, the last paragraph kind of is Brian's singularity must have been affecting my computer there. Sorry, folks. Yeah. The emerging fields of embodied and inactive cognition have started to take a dialogic models of the self more seriously. But for the most part, scientific psychology is only willing to adopt individualist Cartesian assumptions that cut away the webbing that ties self to others. And the phrase, which means, a person is a person through other persons. And that versus sort of the Cartesian, I think, before, therefore I am. So I mean, it's cool to see that also happening, like, geez, 5 years ago. Yeah. Well. And before I didn't really even know her then, and I was getting into stuff here, and I was seeing interactions between her and Chamero on Twitter, and it's maybe it's a bit of a sentimental piece for me because of all the stuff that's happening in the meantime. But yeah, anyway, hold on a second. There's a lot of good stuff happening in that space. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Whoops. Hold on. Computer's being a little silly. Yeah, and thanks. I mean, people keep many articles been posted. Great things, like really nice articles to read and go through, and people putting effort into that. And so I'm thankful for that. My general updates are we got our extension on We Robot. Otherwise, it'd be due in a couple days. So we have I have this weekend, and then I have another weekend. And I don't have anything I really want to show right now, but I would really appreciate it if throughout next week, if I could get some feedback on the posters. So I'm going to try to, I'm yesterday was kind of a little version of it where it was too hot to be outside, so I just had to stay inside all day and did like cleaning, organizing, and work on stuff. and that's probably like that's going to be my weekend. Like it's going to be so. That's what the plan is for that. But yeah, as we kind of alluded to, there's a lot of things that are feeding into this, and I feel happy to be doing that. There's also like, yeah, thank you, Amanda. That'll be good. It may kind of fall in the conjunction with like the reading group, but I don't, if people are around then or want to meet maybe earlier or something, that's fine. I'll mention it in the Slack and kind of see when people are available to talk about it. Also, and this isn't something to, this is kind of a lab manager hat. This maybe when Bradley's back from it. When do you return to normal programming, Bradley? By the way,
like next Saturday, I'll be okay. Normal. So,
I may send you like an email or an overview of this. I should, if like it'll be wise to do it sooner and like kind of prepare something for you and have it come back, or maybe have a discussion in like the admin channel or something. But like there's internships that are going to be blooming with UAlbany soon. Like Casey's reached out to me and sent a couple emails like, hey, like it's kind of time to start thinking about our descriptions. So the UAlbany stuff, we have other fall internships for like Cognition Futures project and everything else. And so we have some like external stuff we have to do, and also some just planning, like how are we gonna, like after we robot, I think there's definitely going to be, the methodology project kind of has a nice path forward. Like I think there's a lot there, and it's just kind of how organized and how many people are going to want to do it, and how much time are we going to spend on it before we get caught up into the things. Because outside of that, it has its own inertia, which is pretty cool. And even getting to a place where like getting ready to start asking, because I floated this around a bit, but even like being able to ask being able to basically interview people about their methodology process and questions, there's a lot of nice things with that project. We have the methodology project. We have kind of the waning of the Google Summer of Code season. I think that's the right one. And then sort of what are we going to be doing in the fall? And so just talking about that and making sure we have our kind of plan for that. That's kind of coming into my mind a bit more. But I haven't done a lot with that yet, but I feel like I have that thing I mentioned time to time, like part of my mind is already in like September, October because of everything else. Yeah. And it's like, okay, what do we want to be doing at that time? So to more discussions about that, and I always kind of mention this and periodically say, people have ideas of projects they want to work on, or topics they want to follow, or things they want to do or step up. And we're talking about established projects here, just as a general announcement for everybody. We're talking about established projects here, but if anybody wants to branch out on their own or start something, you're welcome to do that. It doesn't have to just be me or Bradley doing that. Like the GEM, and this is kind of a nice segue into the upcoming discussion a little bit about grad school. The GEM and magnificence of the lab is that there's opportunity to have project leadership, but also get to do the research you want to do without having to wait 30 years to do it. So what does that mean? We'll say more in a bit. But yeah, there's like Lab Admin Hat, there's stuff on the horizon we need to sort out. I actually make some notes about this now. Yeah, let's see. Outside of that, what else besides Cognition Futures and Lab Admin stuff for me? A couple weeks ago, I mentioned having the conversation with like the design student or the architect student, and how cool that was to have that stuff. I think it'd be really fun also to think like bigger plans for either later this year or next year. But like multidisciplinary conferences or talks, even if we just host a talk, like a talk about agent-based modeling, or whatever, or just like a Google Summer Code recap. Hosting some events, I think, would be a nice thing to do. Like maybe even with a big, we kind of did we, I forget if we ever actually did that thing where it was like I think it kind of became morphed into some other things, but a while ago we were going to do a big event either through Rockwire or something else with like Angela and like a security data privacy fest or something like that. And I don't know if that kind of morphed into some other stuff. I think it did. But having some kind of having some kind of a major a fun thing to do, which may not happen, but like I mentioned from time to time the Envision conference, Princeton. I don't know if
that looked really interesting.
Go around.
Yeah, the website's still there, and they even have something that says 2022, but it does look like there hasn't been anything since 2016. Yeah.
It's been tough because of the pandemic, and also like I have some insider knowledge in the sense that I've been there and stuff, but they made a speaker series for this year, but Envision was one of the first things that really made a lot of things possible for me, like the environment, the attitude, the sense of future, the sense of technology, the sense of ethics and society, all being in the same place. So I would love to do a spiritual successor to Envision one day, even if it's like a 3-hour event, as opposed to like a 2 to 3 day conference. There were always weekend conferences, but like that's a long-term process and commitment and takes time and would be a heavy lift, and it would be experimental because we haven't done it before. But like that's talking to some really people totally outside of my field the last couple weeks has really reminded me of that. And I imagine Jenny, who I periodically mention as part of Plot Twisters, is she's doing the diverse. She's doing She's doing the Diverse Intelligence Summer Institute Storyteller program. I wonder if I could, maybe we could have some kind of a joint venture that way. But we'll see. Anyway, it'd be cool to think about some bigger events too. Maybe even well, this reminds me of the UAlbany days, because we got a bunch of. I was hired as part of one of some grant that like the Hewlett Foundation, and I don't know if anybody knows like David Turetsky. He was a law professor and a lawyer, and he sort of managed the grant, and we did a bunch of, we basically could duplicate the same thing for the methodology project. Basically we could just interview a bunch of people, then host a conference around it, which kind of talks about our simple preliminary findings in a private way, but then also like, hey, let's have a discussion about methodology, and which that's a really big grand idea also, and to be determined. And I say this with some zeal and exuberance, but I like in my mind, my lab manager hat, and like I imagine Parliament Bradley is like, well, it's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to have to coordinate that heavily. So like part of me is happy about that. Part of me is like, geez, that would require a lot. So we'll figure that out, I guess.
Yeah, I want to make a few comments about that. So I like the idea, and I know we did the CogSci discussion group. And in the CogSci discussion group, we got some people, collaborators within the lab, and we did a couple of talks, and we kind of structured it from, general to specific. So we started with an introduction, and then we started with some things that were a little bit deeper into some topical areas. and then we had some discussion afterwards. I like that structure, and I think we could have some sort of event like that. We could do it amongst ourselves, or we could invite people. And inviting people is a little tougher because you'd have to do it on their schedule. So it might not be, they might have to record in advance. You might have to just coordinate, and a lot of people are going to say no. So I've done this a lot. So I've done this, the Rockwire lecture series you just saw, I organized that whole thing. And, it's like a series of talks where you have, there's sort of a general survey in that case. But, you may want to pick a theme. You may want to have like a smorgasbord. And we did this with the New York Celebration of Women in Computing session that we had, which is another one that we did. And so we have as a model 2, arguably 3 of these kind of series. We have the CogSci discussion group in 2021. We have the Celebration of Women in Computing in 2022. And then we have this Rockwire lecture series, which is a hybrid lecture series. It was over probably about 8 weeks, 9 weeks. So yeah, those are the 3 models. We can do other types of models. But I would like to encourage maybe we could do something internal. I don't know if Morgan's interested in giving a talk, or Brian, and it could be on just what they're working on, what they're interested in. We could get people from outside to talk on other topics. I think our value, though, in our organization, we have to think about our own value, because, a lot of universities have lecture series. They invite big names. And the problem with having big names is that, you can't really build on your strengths. One of the strengths we have is participatory investigation. You get to come to the meetings and you can talk about whatever you want, and you can build upon your own interests and build out a project if you want. So I think we should stress that aspect of it. And I don't know if people are interested in coming in from outside to do this kind of participatory stuff, or people in the group here want to do participatory stuff. But I think that's maybe the way to go. And we can do it, we can focus on a topic, or we can just say it's a smorgasbord.
When you say internally, do you mean we're it's just us putting it on for other people, or just in-house for in-house purposes?
Oh, no, it would be a public, for everyone out on the web. It would be I did this with OpenWorm, where we did an open house, and we invited people, we advertised it, and we said, we're going to do a session. It could be live, or it could be recorded, but it's a session where people are able to come and participate, and then maybe view it afterwards. So it would maybe it would be something like this meeting, where we'd block off 3 hours. We'd schedule speakers. The speakers would come in, give their talk, and then we'd have people in the room that are from outside or wherever. And then, they ask questions, and then we maybe put it on YouTube, and we have another audience of people who want to watch it afterwards. And there's YouTube comments are kind of not, I don't know, I don't get into that, but it's different levels of consumption. So you have the people within our own group who maybe are very familiar with some of the topics, like our Cognition Futures discussion group. We have 4 people who do that regularly. So if you do a talk on that, they're really going to love that stuff. And then you have the whole lab, which is people with different areas of interest who say, oh, I didn't even know that was going on. That's interesting. And then, you have people from outside, and they say, well, I didn't even know you guys are doing that. I should join in, or I should learn more. And so this is a nice way to recruit people, but also get attention to the lab, but also get attention to specific initiatives that don't even get the kind of attention that they deserve, because, people are in their own sort of area, even in an interdisciplinary group such as this. And they say, okay, well, I have, this thing I didn't even know was going on because I'm not paying attention to it. they're doing stuff that is maybe relevant to me. It didn't, because the name of it or the label of it isn't the same as the thing I'm interested in. Like, for example, in Cognition Futures, we talk about things that are relevant to computational neuroscience, or maybe even like human computer interaction. And you wouldn't know that from the label, Cognition Futures, I don't know. And so those things those exchanges can occur. Now, Amanda said in the chat she loves this idea. So yeah, thank you, Amanda. So this is, and then Brian posted a link to the Open Worm Open House, which was let's see if I can open that up. So that's the open house, and we did this in 2016. It was hosted by myself and Stephen Larson and Chi-Wai Lee from OpenWorm, and this is Matteo Farinella. He did a lot of art for OpenWorm at one time. He was commissioned to do some open source art, so he has like the brain in a jar, but it's a worm. If you're looking at this. Yeah. And then, the content is all, I didn't even know this was here, but the content is all laid out here. So you have these videos, you have OpenWorm, the story so far. That's a pretty general, talk overview of OpenWorm. Then you have your specific projects, like the C. elegans nervous system, which is a C302 project. It kind of goes into that in detail. You have body simulation, which I don't know, there's no link here. The OpenWorm badge system, which is like an educational initiative. You have DevoWorm, very old version of DevoWorm. Then unit testing. Rick Gherkin, who's at Arizona State, he does this thing called SciUnit, which is unit testing. And then, you have different models like Geppetto and movement validation. And then you have WormSim. So all these down here are just projects that are sort of part of the OpenWorm umbrella. And then after, that was kind of in the morning. It was like, they were 15-minute talks, so it was like 2.5 hours maybe. And then we gave people a break, and then they'd come back for these tutorials. And so there were 2 tutorials, one on this morphozoic and one on cell modeling for neuronal systems. And they were like an hour long, and they would be more involved and have like a demo or die kind of approach, where you'd walk through something. And, demoing just means like walking through something with people. Like a 15-minute talk, you can't get into a lot of details. You can say, here's our thing, here's what we do, here's some papers, here's some ideas. Yeah. With a tutorial, you can drill down and say, I want to do I want to go through this thing. And you want to maybe make a demo where, with computing, it's easy because you can build a notebook like Brian did there for his ABM model. And you can walk through it, show the code, run it. You can see pretty pictures, and everyone is like, oh, I can do that, or I can follow along with that. If it's something like philosophy, or maybe like a broad idea, it may help to sketch things out, like with, laying out the intellectual landscape. So, I do a lot of like whiteboard drawing in the meetings on concepts, and you might do that. You might use like a mural board for ideas. They have like Post-it notes, and you can do like, you can have people, you can solicit ideas, you put them in different places. And we did this for a workshop, I think last year, as a workshop I attended, where we had this mural board open, and then people would just post notes, or as we were talking, we'd post notes. And it was very systematic, so you could go back to the mural board and say, these are the ideas, these are the buckets that we came up with during the meeting. And so then I think it clarifies a lot of things, and so, depending on what you're doing, it's not just, demos aren't just for technology. You can use them for philosophy, or for like ideas that aren't fully formed yet, or, whatever. And so this is all kind of possible, right? This is this kind of structure we want to do. I would definitely encourage us to do that. It would take a while to plan it out, but I definitely think we should do it.
So either late 2022 or 2023 oral open house, oral envision, oral something. Great, it totally will happen. All right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it'll take a lot of work, but if people are excited about anything they might wanna discuss, so yeah, Brian wants to get Daniel Temkin in there.
Yeah, do you guys know Daniel's work?
Not really,
I don't know.
no.
Tell us about it.
Let me see if I can bring him up and maybe just share a little bit. The thing that he does a lot of stuff, but the thing that excites me most about his practice is that he's got these programming languages that he writes that are very non-traditional. He's basically a compiler artist, but he also does these things like straighten trees, where he'll take a really beautiful silver gelatin print of a tree and then straighten the tree so that everything else bends to it. Kind of an interesting conceptual artist, and then also does these dither studies where he just kind of painstakingly paints dither patterns using different pixel variables. But the really interesting part, let me see if I can find some of his programming work. Oh yeah, so this is a programming language that's just all folders. So by making a bunch of different folders, you actually program the language. Bye, Samantha.
Bye, Samantha.
Have a great weekend. And then there's also the place where you can misspell in JavaScript. But anyway, he's a very interesting person to check out that I think would be a good bridge between the science and the arts and the ways in which we think cognitive science related ways and ways that relate to logic and all this other stuff. So. Anyway, I have a lot of people like that in my mind where I'm like, ooh, yeah, we got to bring them in, have them talk to us and tell us about what they're doing, and maybe they'll spark something. So I love this idea.
Yeah.
And also, I love the sound of my own voice, apparently. So I'm always happy to present.
Can you drop a link for that? I didn't quite catch the
Totally, yeah. Hold on.
Yeah. Well, I think, we could, I wouldn't, focus on bringing people in. We can bring maybe, one or two, keynotes, maybe, something like that, where we have people who are outside the lab get to give an overview of their thing, and then have our own people. So, it's like how they do with a conference where they have a keynote and then they have other talks. I definitely want to make this useful for people above anything else. I don't necessarily want, we can do an internal report, but I think it's also good to have make it very useful for people's intellectual development. I'm doing this, you're doing that. There's someone outside of the lab doing something else too. Maybe we can collaborate. So yeah, I definitely, if we could, come up with a list of this kind of people, who'd be willing to do a talk, that would be good.
Yeah, I think this is something that maybe I could see this basically. It could be its own ongoing discussion. It could be its own Slack channel. I think it'll be something fun to do. I think it will bring in some folks. I think it would be also a really cool thing to mention to potential interns also, and say, hey, because back in the classical, I haven't put myself with this mindset in a few years. You're on campus, you join a group, you do something, you get involved. At the end of either one of the semesters, it could be fall or spring, depending on which and whatever, there's some event that you work towards and you do something at.
Yeah.
And it's I did, my favorite honestly was a group called Shakti. They were the South Asian cultural group, and we did Bollywood style dancing, Bhangra dancing and stuff. And it was great because it was totally different. Some of us were great dancers, some of us were not. Some of us were on the professional Bhangra team, but it was just you had time away from stuff. So I don't think we'll be doing. We could do some kind of a distributed dance somehow on the internet to be determined. But I think having having some kind of, this could even basically become oral or orthogonal fests, whatever. It could be. And I think that's one of the questions will be, do I want to do this about, I could honestly see it I think it would be cool to have an annual thing that's like a bigger picture for like a big lab open house or something like that would be fun. Sure.
Yeah.
But also, like, there could be as needed, and I don't know which would be easier to do first. Probably just the open house for the lab. There could be like there. Do I feel like we could have a nice smaller talk about like cognition future stuff? Yeah, totally. Or like a lot of the things around Google Summer of Code with the modeling, agent-based modeling, and just like many of the multi-agent stuff, or like those sorts of things could probably have their own smaller or day talk or session, or like invited talk, or whatever. Like there's different topics, different depending on the topic and how many people in-house we have who want to do things in that area. It seemed like there could be a lot of smaller discussion points too, like even having basically a variant of Charlotte's Philosopher's Web Cafe around a specific topic. Like we did, for those who don't know, we did like a Charlotte. Charlotte is someone from UCL in London, and she's an undergrad. She's great. She's brilliant. She's inquisitive. Also, she's doing some stuff with like Eric Hole, I think, Hoel, who's like a big like modern cybernetics information theory guy. So maybe I was actually just thinking like, well, maybe we could just partner with her for something external with them too at some point, because I think there's stuff there. But basically, what we did was just have like Bradley gave a presentation, and Charlotte asked him a few questions afterwards, and I acted as a moderator between them and like the audience, which is a few people from her small group about stuff like philosophy talk. So I mean, those things happen, and I know Amanda's familiar with philosophy talks, and so I mean we can do those things too. So I don't know which one to push for outright, but I think if we discuss over time, things will kind of separate into, okay, this is a big open house for the whole lab versus maybe we have a lot of stuff brewing for, I don't know, the MetaBrains project or some other, like the AI empathy stuff that we were talking before, or the Society and Ethics team. Society Ethics tends to pick up in the spring when the other conference is. But there's a lot of things to do. So anyway,
I would start small. I would start like kind of small and then grow. If we can get people outside, maybe great. But I wouldn't I would just really kind of focus on, maybe we'll just do like a report, on our projects and kind of have everyone, maybe from the outside and bring some attention to it. Maybe, have one like keynote person from outside, and then that would be like our open house. And it doesn't take a lot of bandwidth to manage, because we want to get people like to give good presentations about their projects, and we want minimal really administration here, because that takes a lot of time, and you'd be surprised how much time it takes.
That's why NeuroMatch happened, because everything got canceled and people had time. And without that time, it would not have happened. Which honestly, I think is a huge thing to think about in terms of the development of many things, both our existence as mammals who overcame the dinosaur period when that pressure was released to be really deep, but also just like how fields of study actually develop and emerge. Like when there's a giant opening of people's time and a pressure source just disappears suddenly, like those are really interesting moments in histories of development of anything. So anyway, small tangent of things I always think about. So okay, a lot of fun talk about that. I wrote some notes. Hope maybe Bradley did, maybe everybody else did, but I think I'm gonna make, if you're, I think I'm gonna either try to repurpose an old channel that we aren't using, maybe research questions, because we don't really use that channel.
Yeah, that'd be good.
There's two posts in it, so I think we're good. I think I might make that our big cool planning channel for event planning channel. Oh, I can't quite do it because that's Bradley's channel.
So I can do that. So what do you want me to rename it?
What should we call it, folks? I don't know, like event planning, maybe, or
like open house, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to call it the specific event so that we can just focus on this one, and then if it goes well, then maybe we can start planning more.
Yeah.
Okay, well, open house is pretty straightforward enough, and not like other channels. There's open chat, but that's quite different in nature. So I think open house is good. Okay. Well, that was a great burst of discussion. If we want to, I could ramble a bit about grad school stuff, but I don't know if people want to do that. We've gone into the second hour of the meeting.
Yeah.
I know, what are people in the mood to discuss right now? I think that's a fair question, because I know Bradley will probably have to go soon. And I talked to Brian a bit, and then it's kind of been through the discussion before, probably, and been through grad school to an extent, which would be useful conversation, but I don't want to make us have a discussion about things we don't need to talk about. So
I think I have about 20 minutes left. We can talk about grad school. I think it would be helpful to. I know Brian's applying, and Amanda's in grad school, and Morgan's been in grad school, and I've been in grad school. But
and I think you were going to touch on like some alternatives as well, right? Or
yeah, the whole like, what path are you going to?
I'd love to hear.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, let's check this here. Okay. Whoops. Hold on. So this stemmed. I think this stemmed because Brian mentioned looking at some programs and stuff, and I'm applying to programs, and I've applied to programs, and Amanda's applied to programs. We all apply to programs and all that stuff, and I don't know. I don't really. I feel like there's so many different ways to begin with this discussion specifically, and I feel like the heart of what I said. Oh, also, like, I think the live stream will end very soon, so it will probably interrupt us and be really awkward.
Okay.
That sound and that voice that we all love. Whoops, I'm trying to do this here. I guess when I think about this topic, the most immediate version of it is my own like life choices, and I think kind of what I said to Brian yesterday was along the lines of, I think the question about what to do in grad school is very. The most important factors of it are the era that you're in, the things you want to do, like what actually matters to you in your life, what are your constraints, whether it's location or finances or time, or how much of a damn you give about certain things. And you know, what is it that you actually want to achieve or do or accomplish? And we talked a bit about sort of the spectrum of, you know, on one side of the spectrum, there's like the independent researcher, the mad scientist who has, you know, no friends, but they just pursue their passions and like kind of keep to themselves. But also, like in a much more real version of that, I think actually of their main focus is existential risk, which is very not mainstream and hard to find funding for. But someone named Phil Torres, they kind of are changing their name to Emil because there's another very famous Phil Torres who does something very different than what they do. But Phil is very passionate about the research that they do, but he's had to. It's been a hard path for him to find either funding or just a place for him to do his work while he's doing other things. He's very intent, and I think he does a good job about bringing up some things. He's been in Envision a couple times. He's done a few different grants. He's done some things with like the I forget if it's Future of Humanities or Future of Life Institute. He got into a PhD or a residency of sorts in Europe, and you know, the path of the solo wanderer is tough in that sense, but also I respect him a lot in the sense that he's pretty unwavering in he's taking as much of his time that he has and resources that he has to do what he wants to do, and I feel like that's noble-ish in terms of intent, at least, and difficult. And I feel like the other opposite end of the spectrum is, you want to do it 4 years old, you take all the courses you can in that through high school or undergrad, you get your PhD as soon as you can, and you immediately get it in tenure track. Like that's sort of like the opposite establishment path of you're using very existing power structures, and you have a very clearly defined course of study, which I think is really great. I think, and it depends so much on the field that you're in, because like if you're into biology, or if you're into certain sciences, there's not a lot of wiggle room. Like you have to be able to do certain kind of experiments to get certain data and show you can do it and build this way. Whereas if you're, computer science is kind of very strange and unique in that sense. And there's almost a major trend of just like, sure, apply to a PhD program, but less than 50% chance that you're going to graduate that program as opposed to just go, join another group or something. I'm not saying that's an actual statistic, but like, I think I know some people going into programs thinking, I just finished my master's and I'll probably do a PhD, but I don't they're not sure. They're not really invested in finishing their PhD program. And it's like, okay. Whereas like, in another field, like there's no question, you have to, like, you're not, like, don't even think about it, you have to finish this if you want to do established kinds of research, and that's why I say like the era that you're in, and I think that's changing kind of fast, even like maybe not as fast as like there's no middle ground, like the power structures aren't going to fade away overnight, but there's a lot of innovation happening, especially in the post-pandemic world, about what's accessible and what we can do. But I think we in this group, what we talk about are we're definitely still the exception to the rule, I would say. Like, this is not, what we do here isn't normal or like the common thing to do. Whether it should or should be is a different story. But yeah, that's kind of my opening background talk about it. And there's a lot background, setting the stage, if you will. There's a lot of smaller questions to have too. And I don't know if people want to ask questions or share experiences they've had in their stuff, or I don't really know where to take the discussion, because I have a lot of things in my mind, and I can talk a lot about my experience, and even like it was even interesting. A couple anecdotes I'll share to prime discussion are, I don't know if you, Brian, were at the New York Celebration of Women in Computing grad school panel discussion, but
live streaming has stopped.
It was very kind of old guard. Like it was true for the people who were saying it as they grew up, and some of them were very in touch with current students, but it's a little creepy sometimes, in the sense that people are very passionate about career advice sometimes, and the world may never have existed that the advice applied to, or may have existed 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And I think, I'm not saying the advice there was bad or wrong. It's more, I really feel like there's not a uniform set of recommendations, as far as I can tell, like across eras, is what I'm saying. Do I think getting credentials and establishing yourself is important? Absolutely. but the ways you can do that now are very different. And it, depending on what you want to do, and the kind of, I keep using the word establishment because I don't know a better one, but like how established and how much legacy inertia there is to the program, the field, the institution matters. I think the answers are all different. I think the real, my real take is like all of the advice is different depending on how established the group is, how forward leaning they are or not, and where they fit into sort of the spectrum that we talked about before about, you know, how much there isn't or isn't there in terms, like how much old legacy structure is there or not. Because yeah, I don't know a whole lot about like a lot of the residencies that like Morgan mentioned, the AI residency, or Brian mentioned the AI residency at OpenAI or other groups. There's a bunch of stuff like that out there. I don't know a lot of them, but like there's sporadic funding. There's like, you know, I know like a couple like Thiel fellows who have like just this seed money. Oh, you're gonna do something great for longevity. Here, take this money, go do it. And that's really cool. But like, I think everybody in this chat right now is ineligible for the Thiel fund because it's age based. Like I think it's under 25 or something, right? So like there's a lot of like weird different funding opportunities that you can find, and you know, I think the last thing I'll say is I think the common thing is there is definitely an element of personal brand at stake, and that knowing not just the typical science communication of talk to the funders, talk to the audience, talk to your lab. Like that's Jenny kind of mentioned that in some of her talk, like, oh yeah, like being, particularly in Europe and in other fields of study, like being this part-time public figure who expresses your results and expertise to the community to be relevant and to be seen and to get funding is a big deal. Yeah, it is. Even here in the United States, obviously. But like, you know, that's part of it, and how much you give a damn to do that affects a lot of what your opportunities are too. But internally, being able to say you're developing expertise in, or you're really passionate about X, Y, Z, I think that universally holds at least. But anyway, I open the floor to. I try to be super broad and nebulous, which I can do pretty well sometimes. But any, you know, who would like to comment or steer something in a certain way?
Well, I'd love to first say that how grateful I am to you and Bradley for, you know, giving people like me this space to feel at home and to talk about things and share things. I'm particularly interested in the kind of the alternatives that people have, whether those, you know, but then, yeah, it becomes very difficult to talk about because it's very open-ended, very broad. You know, like there's, you know, there are funders who are interested in trying to develop new things, you know, like new institutions, right? As well as like funders who are interested in just kind of giving people kind of personal autonomy to work on things, you know. You know, so there's things like, you know, the Ronan Institute for kind of independent scholars, because there's a real need for some infrastructure, you know, mm-hmm. Or, you know, you want to be able, like, teams are important because people have different strengths and weaknesses, right? So, and then infrastructure is important, and you know, so I mean, I've seen some interesting discussions on Twitter about like multi-PI labs, you know, that also seem like an interesting alternative, or you know, it's like conversations that I don't remember having, you know, 20 years ago. Or, you know, a conversation I don't remember hearing 20 years ago.
Yeah. I'd be curious about that too. Like, how has that changed over time? Because Yeah, it sounds like it has changed, but I wasn't around.
Well, I mean, at least like, as academic Twitter is talking about it, it was interesting to see people chiming in from, say like non-US UK places saying like, hey, what we, like welcome to our, our way of doing things here in, country X, Y, and Z, right? which is also, I mean, I had a professor who was the kind of like, he would give this this presentation to incoming, computational students, and one of the things that he had these kind of like 10 things that you have to know, or and one of them was like, the internet's changing everything. And I think it's that certainly this is we are able to have a global network without incredible infrastructure costs, right? So people can be sharing all this kind of information and swapping ideas about how to better manage students, institutions, academic policies, grad student organizing.
I think that's one of the things too, that like one of the heavily implicit things that's come up in a lab, and that like Bradley kind of has a lot of sort of, let's say, connections in this area, and then Morgan, like you're always telling us new stuff too, but I feel like, and I'm kind of doing my own version of it, but I feel like one of the things about maybe not grad school, but maybe like, I don't think we've ever really talked about what I'm about to say directly. And so I don't know how to word it, but basically it has to do with when I was going through both of my undergraduate experiences. I went back to school later in life, and I was only really exposed to very conventional experiences of, I mean, I had a wonderful mentorship experience, which catapulted me into other stuff. But I mean, like, very conventional academic, big, broad conferences like AAAI, like the Neuroscience Society, Society for Neuroscience, and like ACM, and then eventually ACMW, and a little bit of IEEE, which were kind of new at UAlbany at the time. But like, when I can kind of feel, when I say those names, they evoke a very specific, for lack of better terms, establishment, or like very established institutions that have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of weight. And here's our IEEE Spectrum magazine that discusses this stuff. Here's our ACM magazine about this topic, and our group about this. And it's like, I'm not saying those are bad things, but like, I feel like growing up, or like my conventional exposure to stuff has been very heavy, and then a lot of the, like, Princeton and Vision, I only found out about because one of my friends, Dan was kind of connected to and really curious about like future stuff. And actually, I met Dan at my first ever, I don't know how or why I got there, but like in 2016, there was an NYU AI ethics talk, like, I don't know, mini conference, but it was a lot of the philosophers, people like Chalmers was there. I think not Jan LeCun, but like the guys, some big names in AI ethics, and I think Stuart Russell was there or something like that, or like someone who's adjacent to him was there, and like I hit one of them with my backpack, and I didn't know who the hell they were. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, and I was like, I was a total like I had no idea what was happening. But I met Dan, ironically, at that event. We were both from upstate New York, so shout out to upstate New York. But that was like my gateway. That was my gateway conference because I was like, oh, like, you know, I knew, like, I heard a little bit about like novel stuff or like tech ethics stuff, but then I saw these people here doing it, and I met Dan, and Dan was like, oh yeah, Princeton Vision, and there was like I think one of the biggest things in terms of accessibility and pursuing really fun or like novel or progressive stuff is really there is a big network of people striving to do it, and I think, but the thing is, it's I don't like the analogies to like shadow network or intellectual dark web or like these kind of conspiracy esoteric sounding stuff. It's not quite that. It's just it doesn't have the publicity of the other stuff, so it's hard to understand what's going on unless you know what to look for. And I feel like between Morgan, myself, and Bradley, like there's probably a lot of stuff that we know, and it's kind of like it's almost like trying to communicate across a very ineffable like until you realize that like all the stuff in neurotech, like all these people are really trying to develop stuff, and they may not be as popular as Meta is, like because there's very likely you only hear about the big brands or like the biggest institutions and what their take on stuff is. So I mean, it's a little bit of like the Rebel Alliance feeling about it in that sense, and it's kind of like, you know, kind of what I was saying in one of the previous discussions about this is like, where do you want to be in that ecology of stuff, and what do you need to be and what do you need to do? Because I feel like I don't think there's a right answer, but there's sort of, depending on your values and the situations that you're in, like things are a lot more tenable or not. Like right now, it's very easy for me to be where I am in the spectrum because I'm sort of non-traditional in my path, but also, and I know many of us here are, but also like I have the means to pursue a PhD program if I wanted to. Like right now in my life, that's an option for me. If I had a very different family structure, that might be a lot harder in terms of time and effort and moving myself around. But right now I can do that. So I mean, those are answers that come to my mind. I could, there's more I can say, but I'll pause if anybody, like if you have anything you want to say, Brian. I know you kind of talked a lot last time, but I don't know, anything you want to.
Well, it's always helpful to hear people's experiences. Something you were mentioning yesterday was that you're like, I just wish I'd gotten my freaking master's, man. You know, I just wish I'd just gone and done that. Really was like, oh, great. All right, I'm going to go do that now. And then about the PhD program, you and Bradley yesterday said some really nice things, which was basically that it doesn't seem like you really, like me in this case, know what you want to do exactly. Like you don't really have like a research program together. So like until you kind of get there, maybe it's worth just waiting. And Jesse, you were saying this too, that, and you just now as well, like you're in a place where you could do a PhD program, but it would feel like a waste of time to do something that wasn't just right. You know, because like you really only get like one shot at the PhD thing. And in terms of alternatives, I mean, I was telling you, Jesse, a little bit about this yesterday. Like my background is primarily as alternatives to academia. I've done a lot of work with like just having focus groups and meetups and labs like this that are, you know, decentralized and non-funded and just kind of doing the work because we want to and because we love it. And I think there's so much value in that. I even have friends of mine who are now in PhD programs that will call me and, you know, say, man, I wish that we were back in the good old days, you know, hanging out in a dirty garage talking about like conceptual art and stuff, you know, and it's just, so I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think for me, I know that I can always start doing that again. Kind of interested in what institutions can provide, or what problems they might enable us to either solve or see more clearly.
it's so funny because I feel like I don't know if I'm just hearing you repeat your own sort of words from last time, but I think conversations I've had recently, kind of around Jezzy, like kind of around Jenny and Dizzy, the diverse intelligence summer group, and also other people have basically said that exact same, like, what can institutions do, and how much should I rely on them to do it? And just, I know I said this before, but like, I do, yes, I particularly if it's like a computer science master's, I would say just do it. I do kind of, I do regret not getting that sooner in a sense. But there, you know, I don't regret, there are reasons why I didn't also. But like, for, if you have the means and you can get, if you can get anything funded through an employer, just immediately do it. Because, you know, it's kind of that line of, I'm repeating myself a bit, but how do you have credibility in the real world versus how much credibility do you need? Like the stuff that I really want to do, it would go smoother if I have a shiny master's and a shiny PhD. But and particularly in terms of being acceptance or like reach from what I do with it. Do I need those things to do some of the work that I want to do? No, not really. But it's kind of this balancing act of getting credibility for existing systems, getting credibility in the existing era that you're in, versus building the next era that you want to see. And that's not like what people can afford, and I mean that in the affordances sense, but also like in many senses, what you can do in your life and according to your situation and your values. Like, it feels like the answer is so different. Like, it's just so vastly different. Like, I'll vaguely mention Avery here. They're not present, and I don't always like to speak when they're not here. I say all the bad stuff, but just off camera, behind back. But anyway, Avery is in a very difficult situation, but they constantly contribute to this lab. Even they're not here, but they're constantly looking at new material, talking to me about it, talking to Jenny about it, talking to other people in our circle about it. And so, I think Bradley and myself and Morgan and kind of what we're espousing here are there's a certain humility and appreciation for the process, and kind of what Brian just said is like having environments where you can exist without the pressure of just let's play with this idea. And Jenny's really been to play and this kind of plot twist thing. It's like, give yourself the space to have that experience, right? Okay, sure. But then like, what am I trying to do? I'm gearing up again. I have access to a fellowship, and I'm going to apply to some fellowship related programs because why not? If I can get funding and credibility through the fellowship. But also, like, I want those programs to be interdisciplinary. I haven't said interdisciplinary this whole today, but that's the main thing. Like, if people if you wanted to just study machine learning, you know what to do, either through a PhD or not. Like, you have no questions. Like, you can have questions, but like, it's very clear path forward. If you want to be a machine learning engineer, I think all of us could probably, with a Google search or two, say, okay, well, here, if you don't, for some reason, you don't have the internet ability in your life, you could say, well, I do, and just point them like a million different ways to get what you want, right? If you want to study, if you want to advance, if you want to be a embodied intelligence thought leader, or write a book about embodied intelligence and shift some things, like that's a little bit different. That's not the same, because it's not technical in the same way. the methodology question we all know about, but also, I mean, we have very established people in the field saying, what is representations? Maybe we should just start over. I don't know. It didn't really work out too well. What are we talking about? Let's, so it's like, when people talk about career paths in academia and school, like the gap, I don't know how to explain, but there's such a huge rift between what I just said. Like it's almost unimaginable what it's like to be in those two different things for me. Maybe I'm biased because I'm in one more than the other, sort of. But like, I don't know. There's such a shift there. Anyway, are you gonna say something, Amanda? I know you came to the screen.
Well, I know we're just about out of time, but I just wanted to say, so I did a 2 years master's program. I finished in spring of 2020, which was not a great time to graduate. But do we have time for me to just like say?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So I finished undergrad. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I liked to study. So I was not really looking at PhDs because 5 to 7 years, that was too long of a period. I couldn't even wrap my head around that length of time, having just finished undergrad. So I found like 2 funded philosophy master's programs, and I applied to both of them, and I picked one of them. The fact that it was funded was incredibly important to me, because I also just needed a job. The fact that it was like an hour from where I had been living was important to me, and the fact that my partner was already in that program was important to me. So like those were really the main factors, and it was only 2 years, so it was a small commitment.
So can I ask, when you say funded, you don't just mean the education? Do you also mean like a stipend?
Right. I had to teach. I got paid for being.
But you got paid like Europeans do. And I don't think they are required to teach. but
I had to teach all 4 semesters.
Because Europeans look at us and say, like, this is crazy. Yeah. But anyway, sorry.
Right. So, there's only there's just a small handful of philosophy master's programs that will pay you. So I guess I just, I was able to prioritize all of these other factors. So making the decision to do that master's program was pretty easy for me. The decision to do a PhD, it seems completely different to me. Maybe that's just because I haven't really started that process or made the decision. But I had a great experience in the master's program, but committing to a PhD does feel completely different to me. And part of it is because, what was that?
I was saying it will be your life.
Right, and I guess my feeling finishing the master's program was until I know exactly what I want to study, I'm not going to start a PhD. And I guess I'm sticking to that. So if I I feel like I have a lot to figure out before I would commit to a PhD, and I also am still at a point where I would be prioritizing location, and those other factors. That's been my grad school experience and thoughts.
Would it be different if it was 5 to say 5 years of and it was paid? It would be like applying for a job.
If it would be, sorry, what do you mean?
So in Europe, you get about 4,000 euros a month to do a PhD.
Okay, so I guess I've only really looked at the details of philosophy PhDs, and those are generally, you get paid because you teach. So I would, it functioning also as a job would be incredibly important to me.
Right. And that's why I say sometimes when I'm talking, it depends when I'm talking to Americans or I'm talking to Europeans and they're asking about these things, it's completely different, right? Because they're like, and when I tell Americans that you can get paid to go to school, they don't believe me. Until they look it up and it becomes a bit of a barrier. I wish we had more languages and kind of more diversity here in the States, so people didn't feel so uncomfortable being in a country where they don't speak the language, but they get paid to actually go to school. I think it would change. It would change the calculus for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So
right after undergrad, I definitely immediately decided I wasn't going to go into more debt for school.
And shouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to see a few things to wrap up. So the first thing is, I just wanted to. First thing is, I think this is a great conversation, and I think it's interesting. Maybe you can think about this in terms of not only graduate school advice, but how to position the lab in terms of how we can contribute to people in grad programs or getting to that stage where, facilitating your research towards maybe a PhD program, or even sometimes, if you're doing because a PhD is really a research degree. You are supposed to come up with a project. And so the project then, you don't really get taught how to do that in a PhD program. You just have to kind of bootstrap things. So this is, I think, a good the way we do it here is a good opportunity to help people bootstrap that, but give them institutional support and, feedback and a community for that. So, I think there's definitely a very strong tie-in to the graduate school experience. It's just the question is, how do we do that in a more systematic way?
I feel like it'd be very easy, if we were to make a brochure for orthogonal research and education lab, be part of our 2022-2023 cohort as a graduate student, and we say, the tagline could be, don't wait 30 years to get started on the research you want to do now. Something like that. That's it. And that's what I've been saying all week. That's it. Where's the space people going to give a damn about your research that you can't get funded someplace else? A lot of situations look, this isn't going to get us into nature. This isn't going to, we're not going to get funding for this. So, sorry, kid, but, you got to wait 15 years just like I did. And, stuff that's real. That's very real stuff. And I do think what you said, Bradley, is totally the case. And it's tough because I do almost feel like, in one sense, I feel like there's kind of an interesting, not divide. It's not a division. It's just something I noticed being in the lab for a while now, that there's kind of a graduate accessibility split from undergraduate accessibility split. I came in way on the undergraduate side, where it's what is research? Do I want to make a blog post about my interests? What you don't what are you doing? And then the graduate level is I know what I want to do, but nobody really cares. So can I find the space to do this? Can I find, is that people going to listen? Is anybody going to listen to me? And even just that question, I think, is very a lot of my friends across different fields have to deal with that question a lot. So I think Oral does a lot for that. Oral does both the undergraduate accessibility, but there's a specific graduate level accessibility that is very unique, and I do think we should maybe feature it a bit more.
I just want to say I've really been enjoying Stacey Abrams' book, Lead from the Outside, and one, just about her experiences with education, but two, she's got some great sections on do you actually know what you want to do?
Yeah.
and bringing that out, but certainly some of the goals. It helped me kind of it was someone who was articulating things that I think I've been thinking, and big part of it is like, yeah, what are the things that you found difficult, and can you make, what are the things you found difficult on your journey, and what can you do to make that easier for the next person, right?
Yeah.
And like, I can't do her book justice in a short period, but it's highly recommended, and yeah, like certainly that was kind of these are the kind of conversations that we've been trying to have at NeuroTechX, in terms of this similar kind of decentralized structure. What do people need to get going? So, and like, can we focus on tools that they need to do, or like, what are the core tools that will allow the most people to do the most things, right? Just and I've learned a lot from this lab too.
Yeah.
About how to do that.
Great. All right.
It sounds like you're about ready to depart, Bradley.
Yeah. Why don't we wrap it up? Yeah. I'm glad we had this conversation. I took a lot of notes, so we'll be revisiting this. And definitely, if you want to reach out about things like, if you're thinking of this, is why we want to do like projects where we want to have people take leadership, because again, that's something that helps you in a grad program, but also like helps you just kind of do open source sort of, development of software or other tools. And so there are a lot of ways that we can serve that sort of need. But I also want to get back to some of the sort of the conversations around the open house idea. So what kind of open house do we maybe want to have? How do we want to participate in that? Okay. Well, thanks for attending this week.
I can hear you a little bit, Brian.
Oh, I cut out? Okay. So yeah, I wanted to revisit the stuff about the project management and that, but I also wanted to do this thing about the open house and how we want to proceed on that. I definitely think it's an opportunity for people to encapsulate their project and their approach and advertise it to a broader audience. And then we'll try to do things to like get people from the outside involved.
Yeah. This was the implicit, semi-explicit professional development conversation that I've cryptically alluded to for a while. That's part of it, for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The first half of this was recorded, but all of our talk about the second half and open house and this stuff was not recorded. So just to mention that. But I'm glad I took some notes. Brother took some notes. Please, and then if anybody has thoughts about this, honestly, put them anywhere. Put them in the open chat. Put them in lab admin. Put them in general. Put them in general if you want, because this is all like big stuff. But I really encourage. I may even ask like. I might even try to like solicit feedback explicitly from this talk from everybody here, just because I think there's important stuff on a lot of different fronts from what we talked about. But yeah, that's all I got for today. Anybody else want to have any final thoughts? I suppose.
Nope.
Great discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. Thank you, everybody. And enjoy your vacation, Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Talk to you next week. And I'll be back next week, so. All right. Take care.
Take care.
Hello. Now I'm going to cover some papers for this week. We're going to go over a couple papers maybe relevant to people's interests. Thank you again, Jesse and Amanda and Morgan and Brian, for your discussions about graduate school and about how the lab can facilitate research agendas, especially for young scholars, but also for people who want to do things that are more outside of the traditional system. So we're going to revisit some of those things, but I want to go to the papers. So what do I want to talk about today? Well, let's talk about this paper here. So this is a paper I found this week. This is in a special issue on consciousness science and its theories. And it's called Back to Square One, the bodily roots of conscious experience in early life. So this is a nice example of like a combination of embodiment and consciousness, which don't know too much about, so bear with me. And then early life, so we're dealing with development. So this is very much in our developmental AI area, but also in cognition futures. Adam Safran, we know in the lab, is one of the authors on here. So let's take a look. So the abstract reads, most theoretical and empirical discussions about the nature of consciousness are typically couched in a way that endorses a tacit, adult-centric, and vision-based perspective. So this is also, I think, true of attention research, and we had a discussion in the Slack about attention research, I think it was last week, where we talked about attention and maybe that they're rival models of attention based on whether your interests are philosophical or psychological or even developmental. And so there are different ways that you can look at that. And in the same way, consciousness research is also adult-centric and vision-based. This paper defends the idea that a consciousness science may be put on a fruitful track for its next phase by examining the nature of subjective experiences through a bottom-up developmental lens. So what is a bottom-up developmental lens? Well, we know that development is, of course, the ability to transform from, this embryo, in the human case, this embryo to an adult. So you go through childhood, you build experiences. And what's important here is that your nervous system is also developing, or it's being assembled, it's transforming, it's emerging. But that emergence is the key to this, because a bottom-up approach really suggests that development is about a bottom-up organization. So it's not necessarily guided by like top-down supervision, it's guided by bottom-up sort of emergence of concepts, emergence of mechanisms, and so forth. We draw attention to the intrinsic link between consciousness experiences and experiencing subjects, which are first and foremost embodied and situated organisms, essentially concerned with self-preservation within a precarious environment. So their focus here is on embodied and situated organisms. And we had a conversation about this in the Cognition Futures group this week about the different definitions of embodied, situated, embedded, and some of these other terms that get thrown around in this area of research. And our sort of consensus is that situated is sort of similar to embedded, but it's not really similar. But embodied is, of course, different from situated in the following way. Embodied means that you're embodied in some larger context, that you have a body or a phenotype that you use to interact with your environment. So if my phenotype is different from your phenotype, my embodied experience will be different. This goes from development up to just interacting with things. Situated is a little bit different in that it's situational. So every context you're in is different. Every context has its own opportunities to acquire things. And so in that sense, it serves like an embodied phenotype. But, you can use both of them, and you can think about both cases intersecting and being separate and contributing to this variation that we see. So this is a nice area to kind of talk about more further. We'll probably talk about it in Cognition Futures this week as well. But what this organism is really, its primary concern is self-preservation within a precarious environment. So this term here, it's essentially saying that there's a fitness imperative. And maybe that's a crass way to say it, if you're in this area, but that's essentially it. You're trying to preserve yourself in an environment with a lot of challenges. Now, I don't know how this fits in with altruism or the role of group selection or any of those things. But it's maybe that's an interesting thing to think about. Our paper suggests that in order to understand what consciousness is, one should first tackle the fundamental question: how do embodied experiences arise from square one? So an embodied experience is arising from something. The nervous system is assembling. It's being turned on. You're getting your first experiences. And then you have these embodied experiences because your nervous system's turning on. Your embodied phenotype is also what we might call turning on, which means it's developing and forming as not only as it's interacting, but like it's fundamentally changing as it's interacting. So one part of development is, of course, not just composing things into larger parts. So your nervous system is composing itself, and then your concepts that you're acquiring are composing themselves, but also a transformation in shape of this embodied phenotype and the shape of the experience. So how do these embodied experiences arise from square one? So this also fits into some of the agent-based modeling we've been doing in the developmental AI sphere with developmental Bradenberg vehicles. And, a lot of the work that we've done so far has been in like evolving different forms of control or forms of internal model that develop, but we're also working on developing phenotypes that these nervous systems are embedded in. So this is really kind of interesting from our standpoint in the lab. We then highlight one key yet overlooked aspect of human consciousness studies, namely that the earliest and closest environment of an embodied experiencing subject is the body of another human experiencing subject. So basically, we can use other humans as an analog for looking at a specific subject. We present evidence speaking in favor of fairly sophisticated forms of early sensory motor integration of bodily signals. So this is evidence of where you're getting early sensory motor integration, and self-generated actions also being established in utero. So this is actually evidence of all this happening, not just in childhood, but also in the uterus, which is kind of interesting because we've in the DevaWorm group, which is another side group, we've published a couple papers on C. elegans and how in other organisms that have relatively small connectomes, and how those connectomes wire up in development. And one of the things you see is that you do actually see behaviors that occur pre-hatch, which means it's still in the egg in the case of C. elegans. And so a lot of those behaviors can be, they're generated maybe by muscle spasms. And so, it's hard to say whether those are like really truly what's going to happen in the child and in the adult in terms of a central nervous system control. But I find this interesting that people are looking at this in humans as well. So this is a very interesting area where you get these first signs of a behavior that are emerging. We conclude that these primitive and fundamentally relational and co-embodied roots of our early experiences may have a crucial impact on the way human beings consciously experience the self, body, and world across their lifespan. So again, this goes all the way back into the uterus, and then a lot of these sensory motor experiences will affect adult experience and adult consciousness and cognition. So they do. This is a philosophical paper, so they get into a lot of evidence that's sort of secondhand to the study here. So they talk about the hard problem: how and why do certain physical structures and functions of the brain and body relate and give rise to conscious subjective experiences? So this is this hard problem of consciousness, and so. Most theorists address this question by exploring the relationship between conscious experiences and the brain. Okay, so this is the traditional approach. Let's see. In this paper, we propose to zoom out from the classical conundrum of the relationship between consciousness and its neural correlates, Instead, we go back to square one in order to examine the nature of experiences as they arise in human early life in utero. The underlying assumption is that by endorsing a bottom-up and developmental perspective and exploring how conscious experiences dynamically arise and develop in concert with the developing organism, we may reveal important insights into what consciousness is at its basic organic structure. So this is a very interesting perspective, this bottom-up perspective, and they have a table here where they talk about overview of the theories of consciousness and implications, endorsing a developmental lens. So they have these different theories of consciousness here, which range from predictive processing to higher order thought to global neuronal workspace to integrated world modeling. And this is sideways, you won't be able to see it. I don't know if I can flip it in this form of a PDF reader, but in any case, I'm not going to go through it very deeply, but basically there are all these it's like an overview of the different theories, and then like some of these conditions, and then you try to match up where the conditions are with the theory. So it's a very exhaustive review. If you want, you can read the paper to find out more about this. So actually they get into this interesting point here about first priors. So the most basic perceptual experience is the first priors, and Anastasia is Sionica is the author of this, and she's one of the authors of this paper, may arise already in the womb. That is, when humans share bodily and organismic resources with another human being. So the first priors are actually formed when the uterus, or when the embryo is in the uterus, and the mother is also part of that experience, which is kind of an interesting perspective on that. One essential yet overlooked aspect of current discussions on consciousness is that experiencing subjects first develop within another human body. These primitive and fundamentally relational co-embodied roots. So now we're talking about co-embodiment. You have the mother, you have the child, and they're co-embodied. Our experiences may have crucial impacts on the way human beings start consciously experiencing the self, body, and the world. So they go through the paper here. And then they're going to go through some of this. And I'm trying to find maybe some figures that kind of summarize the ideas here. But actually, if you want to get back to this idea of the sensory motor roots of embodied experiences in utero, a significant body of work in philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience propose that at the heart of the human perceptual experience of all kinds lies the integration of bodily sensory inputs. So this is an old idea. It goes back to Varela, to Anil Seth, to Legrand, and a couple other people. The embodied aspects of self-related experiences have been extensively investigated in the literature from various theoretical perspectives. Here we build on the fairly uncontroversial idea that the multisensory integration of sensory signals must always serve the survival and maintenance of the body within a wider physical and social environment. So this is an idea that, it's basically the idea of fitness, that you have multi-sensory integration is serving this fitness imperative. It's also, not just fitness, but also maintenance of the body is homeostasis. So there's this aspect of, survival, but also regulatory homeostasis. And this is not only physical, but this is also the social environment. So, multisensory integration is basically trying to interpret different streams of sensory information and bring them together in a way that serves these imperatives. So to achieve this vital goal, the organism needs to remain active. So it needs to move around. Rather, it needs to actively coordinate the movements of its skeletal musculature to achieve in action the goals that sustain its vitality. So in the uterus, you have an embryo that's not quite, it's trying to figure out how to move. So it's gaining these, limbs and things, and it's trying to figure out how to move them. And this continues on into childhood and maybe even into adulthood. But this is something that needs to happen sort of very early on in development. So this coordination of the skeletal muscular structure is important. It's not only important for like movement skills and social skills outside the womb, but it's important for the development of the tissues themselves, because muscle needs to twitch in order to remain viable without some sort of neuronal input. And then once the neuronal inputs make their way to the muscle, that innervating that target tissue enhances the connectivity of in the nervous system, but also enhances the activity of the muscle and tunes it so that movement is a little bit more controlled. So there are a lot of reasons for this sort of movement. They're both kind of autonomous movements of muscle, autonomous movements of limbs, and then also when the nervous system gets connected and starts to make these unified experiences, they encounter these unified experiences. It's also important. All animals share this common foundation of sensory motor integrative activity, mediated by a highly evolved cell system to serve this purpose rapidly and with efficient effect in the nervous system. And citation of Sherrington from 1947, so this is an old neurophysiological reference. It has been proposed that a potentially reliable marker of an organism's emergence of perceptual experiences is the identification of anticipatory, goal-directed sensory motor actions. The development of perspective, anticipatory awareness, and motor control emerges at the beginning of fetal life and at the end of the first and beginning of the second trimester. So this is a specific point in the fetus, in the time course of the fetus. This is an emerging hub of endogenously generated actions with outcomes contingent on proprioceptive, tactile, and distance receptors to sense the effect of one's self-generated action on the external interpersonal world. So when you start to get the nervous system wired up, the first thing you do is kind of calibrate it. Sorry for the mechanical metaphors, but you try to figure out how it moves. And there's a concept called motor babbling in the developmental psychology literature, which is where early life, the juvenile moves around. They're trying to find how to manipulate things, how to manipulate their own limbs. And it takes a while to learn that to some extent, or to coordinate that, I guess. And so that's what's going on there. But this is all very important for later stages of movement and of experience. And so they talk here about, they kind of go through some of the developmental milestones. In human development, the first signs of the self-generated actions are at exactly 7 weeks and 2 days of gestational age. This is a composition of whole body, writhing worm-like movements with a patterned oscillatory cascade that travels limbs and trunks as one integrated system. So this is like where you're trying to figure out how to move your different parts of the body. And it's at a very specific age. I guess it's a critical period. You could consider it a critical period. These very first movements lack the discrete, isolate control of a part of the body, an arm, a finger, commonly associated with voluntary intentional control. So it's not intentional towards a target. Rather, they reflect a whole organismic motility within uterine fluid dynamics and the gelatinous structure of a late-stage embryo. So they're trying to work out in the embryonic fluid, basically. So the latter has limited affordances for action. So the affordances are less in the uterine environment. At this point, the nervous system is very immature. Cervical spinal cord nuclei are rapidly forming. Axodendritic synapses are sort of forming, and then you have these afferent fibers and neurons that are kind of connecting in. So everything's getting wired up at this point. And so it's not until 12 to 14 weeks of gestational age that the organism, now an early stage fetus, entering its second trimester of gestation, makes isolate movements of the limbs or head, indicating differentiated voluntary control of discrete elements of the skeletal musculature. So this is a point I make again and again. It's not just, that development is compositional. Development isn't merely compositional. It's transformational. And you can see this in this time course where you have these critical periods of acquisition of these different pieces of information from the uterine environment with an emerging nervous system. It's wiring up, but it's transforming from one type of nervous system to another. It's either somewhat disconnected to sort of this integrated nervous system, and then eventually you're going to transform your environment from the fetal environment to the real world, the outside world. And so this is a transformational process as well as a compositional process. So you're gaining these abilities, you're gaining these parts of the nervous system, but then you're also things are transforming in different ways. So fetal awareness of the consequences of a self-generated action is also evident in anticipatory movements of the hands and fingers to a target part of the body during self-directed action. And so the mouth of the fetus is observed open during mouth-directed movements of the arm, carrying the finger to it, but before actual contact. This indicates an awareness of a self-generated future that manifests in sensory motor movement and anticipates its sensory consequences. Finally, at birth, the detailed high-precision sub-second kinematic analysis that they did on this fetus, which I'd like to see some of the data. I guess it's in this reference, Delafield Butt, 2007, who's another co-author on this, states newborn arm movements are prospectively organized with an anticipation of their outcome in body space. Now, this brings up a question of what would be considered to be an innate movement, our movements of the hand towards the mouth. Is that innate, or is that something that's learned in the womb, or is that something that just happens because there's limited degrees of freedom, and those things are sort of coordinating themselves? They seem to happen, generally. So I imagine they're kind of innate, and this goes back to our developmental AI work. So what is it that we want to make innate in our agents versus something that isn't innate that we want them to learn? Some of these sort of motor primitives are important maybe to make those innate things, and then things that are non-innate are things that build upon those. And so you can see this sort of the time course of this process here. And the question is which one of these are sort of innate things, or if you were building an agent, can be made innate, and which of these things maybe should be learned. Maybe all of these things should be learned and experienced by the agent, which is kind of an interesting point, in that if something is innate, if you have an innate behavior and you experience that innate behavior, does it contribute to experience or consciousness or what? Because you can have things that are innate that unfold in different ways, and this is why I bring this up, because it's kind of an interesting question that we could go back to later and ask the question, and we could do this in agents even, ask the question, if you encode something to happen at a certain time, that deterministic behavior, and the agent experiences that deterministic behavior, is that something that contributes to experience, to consciousness, or maybe just to if it happens in different shaped bodies, is it something that is experienced differently or results in different types of behaviors that build upon it? So it's a very important set of things that we could follow up on there. So this is all very interesting. I'm not going to go through the entire paper, but basically it kind of goes through some of the roots of early conscious experience, and it goes through some of the phylogenetically ancient brain structures that are involved in some of these things. So again, this is kind of evidence that this is something that's not only innate, but is phylogenetically conserved. So we could, build different types of agents. We could build the phylogeny of agents where all these things are sort of at the base of what they have to work with. And then there's a lot of variation that sort of emerges from that. So this is a very interesting paper. I would suggest that if you want to know more, you can read through it, and we can discuss it maybe in our Cognition Futures group, maybe in terms of the developmental AI implications. But I think that's definitely good to follow up on. So at the end of the paper, they say, finally, endorsing a developmental view may help us develop a more dynamical, real-life understanding of conscious experiences based on an explanatory model focusing on how we relate to ourselves, the body, and the world, rather than exploring how we statically and photographically detect and report a small dot on a screen. So with that, I think that's enough for this week. Again, thanks for attending the meeting, and talk to you next week. Thank you.